Hey guys, tonight we slip into the streets of ancient Rome, where the lamps flicker with olive oil and the air smells faintly of sweat, incense, and roasted chestnuts from vendors who don't even glance at you. Because tonight, it's not the life of an emperor or gladiator that we're drifting into. It's your life, and you're about to be sold. You probably won't survive this. Your worth is measured not in talents of silver, but in the curve of your shoulders, the gloss of your hair, and whether your teeth are straight enough to make someone laugh at your expense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, because you might fall asleep during this story, and share only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, type in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing the mosaic of times and places, almost like we're in a Roman forum ourselves. Now, turn off the lights and lie down on your chair or bed, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You're herded into a courtyard where the stones under your bare feet are still warm from the day's sun. The Roman auction block looms in the middle, a wooden platform surrounded by curious onlookers who smell of leather sandals and garlic on their breath. Chains rattle at your wrists and ankles, biting against your skin as you're nudged forward. The slave dealer, sweating under his faded crimson tunic, pats your shoulder like you're a horse about to be sold. And in fact, the same man probably auctioned off horses earlier this week. A boy, hardly older than you, steps onto the platform first. The dealer bellows his merits. Strong arms, good teeth, no limp. The crowd mutters, eyes evaluating him as though he's a loaf of bread, one they might reject if the crust isn't shiny enough. The hammer falls, and he is dragged away by a man whose toga is embroidered with thin, purple stripes, signaling the wealth of an equestrian. You don't even see the boy's face again, just his hunched back disappearing into the crowd. Then it's your turn. The dealer shoves you forward, and the plank creaks beneath your feet. You're forced to raise your arms, to turn in a slow circle, while strangers peer at your body with greedy calculation. They lift your lips to check your teeth, pinch the flesh of your arms to test for strength, even tug at your hair, as if determining whether a wig maker could profit from it later. A historian once wrote that Romans at these auctions sometimes hung wooden tablets around a person's neck, listing flaws like prone to fever or slow learner. You're lucky, or unlucky, enough to get no such placard. Your worth is apparently obvious to all who watch. 300 sesterces, one man calls. His voice echoes through the courtyard, followed by chuckles and whispers. Another voice rises higher. 400. Soon, the numbers blur together, each bid another nail in the coffin of your freedom. The dealer beams, knowing he'll pocket a cut for himself, while you feel the air grow heavy around you. You notice a fringe detail. In Rome, auctions weren't always held in hidden courtyards. Sometimes, they were staged in the open forum itself, where senators and shopkeepers alike could pause their errands to glance at the newest flesh available. Imagine that, your most humiliating moment treated as casual entertainment for someone on their way to buy figs. Historians still argue whether these public markets normalized slavery so deeply that even children grew up thinking it as natural as breathing. You don't need a debate. You can see the answer in every stare locked on you. At last, a final shout pierces the bidding frenzy. A man with sun-scorched skin and a ring of bronze on his finger claims you for a sum that would buy a modest house in the Subura district. The dealer bangs his staff, and the deal is sealed. Ownership transfers in an instant. You, who once belonged to yourself, now belong to another. Your chains jingle as you're led off the platform. The crowd disperses, muttering about prices and bargains, already forgetting your face. To them, you were just another commodity, like amphorae of wine or sacks of grain shipped in from Egypt. Your buyer doesn't even glance back. He assumes you'll follow because the iron links ensure that you must. The streets outside the courtyard buzz with normal Roman life. Vendors hawk honey cakes, beggars stretch out calloused hands, and legionaries swagger by in crested helmets. Somewhere, a flute player stumbles over a melody. You walk through it all, invisible, though your heart pounds against your ribs. Every step away from the auction block is a step deeper into the unknown, into a world where your laughter, your tears, your choices are no longer your own. For a moment, you let your eyes drift to the rooftops where swallows dart against the fading sky. You think of escape. Could you run, slip through alleys, disappear? But your wrists ache from the iron cuffs, and you remember the punishment: crucifixion for runaway slaves, their bodies left hanging on roadsides as a warning. Romans treated those crosses almost like billboards. A joke for you. Welcome to Rome, where even the advertisements scream in agony. As night falls, your buyer tugs your chain sharply, leading you toward the district where torchlight flickers against plaster walls smeared with graffiti. Some of the scribbles are obscene, crude drawings of bodies and names etched by drunkards, but one phrase catches your eye: Felix hic fuit. Felix was here. You almost laugh, because isn't that the ultimate reminder? People come, people vanish, and all that remains are scratches on stone. And tomorrow, when another auction fills the block, no one will even remember your name. The chain jerks again and you stumble forward, the stones rough beneath your bare feet. The man who bought you doesn't say a word. He doesn't need to. His grip on the iron tether is enough of a conversation. Each tug is a command, each silence a reminder of your new place in the world. You are not a companion, not a worker, not even a person, just a possession. The streets narrow as he leads you away from the bustle of the forum. You pass taverns where laughter spills out with the smell of sour wine, and bakeries where the day's last loaves cool on stone shelves. For one absurd moment, you imagine ducking into one of these shops, hiding behind a stack of bread, and pretending life could still be ordinary. But the weight of the chain pulls you back. Freedom is a dream you can't afford to dream. You finally arrive at a heavy wooden door, scarred with scratches that look too much like fingernail marks to be accidental. The man pounds on it, and after a pause, it creaks open. A woman stands there, her dark hair piled high with pins, her face painted in thick lines of red and black. She glances at you once, and you feel her eyes strip away whatever scraps of dignity you thought you had left. She nods to your buyer, takes the chain, and slips a pouch of coins into his hand. Just like that, you are transferred. Ownership passes as smoothly as money passing palms. Inside, the air smells of lamp oil and stale perfume, the kind that can't quite mask sweat and sickness. The woman leads you down a corridor lined with tiny clay lamps set into niches. She doesn't introduce herself. She doesn't need to. Her authority is evident in the way the other women avert their gaze as she passes. You sense she is the Lena, the madam, and you, by contract and by iron, are hers now. Your first stop is not a room, but a table where a scribe sits waiting. He has ink-stained fingers and a bored expression, as though recording the transfer of human beings is just another dull task before supper. He dips his reed pen and scratches your details onto a wax tablet: age, height, any distinguishing marks. He pauses when his eyes flicker over a scar on your arm, then notes it without comment. To him, you are inventory. A pot might be chipped, a blanket might be frayed, and you are a body with scars. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. In ancient Rome, contracts of sale sometimes included guarantees. If a slave turned out to be sickly or defective, the buyer could return them like a faulty amphora of oil. Imagine the horror of being exchanged with the same casual tone someone uses to say, "This one leaks." Historians still argue whether these guarantees protected slaves from being worked to death or simply gave owners another tool of control. Either way, You are now bound not by ropes alone, but by law. The scribe slides the tablet across the table, and the madam presses her seal into it, a tiny mark of wax that might as well be carved into your skin. The chain is removed, but not out of kindness. Instead, a thin iron collar replaces it, cool and heavy against your throat. You touch it instinctively, only to be swatted away by the madam. "Don't," she snaps, her Latin sharp and cold. "It stays until I say otherwise." The collar isn't just for show. Roman law permitted owners to inscribe them with messages like, "If you find me, return me to my master." Sometimes even rewards were promised for returning a runaway. You are a walking advertisement of your captivity. The madam gestures for you to follow again, and soon you reach a cramped dormitory. Straw mats line the floor, each one little more than a flattened nest of dried stalks. A few women glance up as you enter, some young, some old, all carrying the same weary expression etched deep into their faces. They look at you, then away, as though they've seen too many arrivals to care anymore. You notice bruises on one woman's arms, another coughing into a rag, another absently braiding and unbraiding her hair, as if the motion is all that keeps her sane. You try to greet them, but the words stick in your throat. What would you say anyway? "Nice to meet you, fellow prisoners?" Instead, you sit on the straw assigned to you and press your back against the cold wall. The madam lingers in the doorway. "Tomorrow," she says simply. "Tomorrow what?" "Tomorrow you'll learn the house rules. Tomorrow you'll serve your first patrons. Tomorrow you'll wish you hadn't lived long enough to see tomorrow." The door slams shut, and you're left with the flickering light of a single oil lamp and the sound of shallow breathing from the women around you. One woman leans toward you and whispers, "Don't fight her. Don't fight anything. It only makes it worse." Then she turns away, curling up on her mat. You don't even know her name. You lie there staring at the ceiling beams above, dark and cracked with age. You imagine running your fingers along them, counting each crack, each groove, until maybe you fall asleep. And because even despair can't silence sarcasm forever, a thought creeps in. Well, at least rent's free. But the joke sours on your tongue. Nothing here is free. Not the mat, not the air, not your body. Every breath is borrowed, and tomorrow the payments begin. The night is long, broken by the creak of wood and the muffled sobs of strangers in the dark. You drift in and out of uneasy sleep until the slam of the door startles you awake. Morning in this place doesn't come with birdsong. It comes with commands. The madam's sharp voice cuts through the room, ordering you all to rise. The straw clings to your hair, dust scratches your throat, and you realize that the air here never really smells fresh. It always carries the sour tang of too many bodies pressed into too little space. You're ushered down a narrow hallway toward a chamber that feels more like a preparation stall than a room. A basin of cold water sits in the center, cloudy from the countless bodies before you. "Wash," the madam instructs. You plunge your hands in, flinch at the chill, and splash it over your face, wondering how many other skins it has touched. There are scraps of cloth for wiping down, perfumed oils in cheap clay jars that don't quite mask the undertones of rot. The idea, you realize, is not to cleanse you, but to dress you up, make the product shine before it goes on display. One of the older women leans close and whispers as she rubs oil into her arms. "Smile tonight, no matter what. First night sets the tone. If you fight, they'll break you harder." Her eyes, rimmed red from years of tears, dart toward the madam, who is inspecting each of you like she's lining up soldiers for battle. Then comes the clothing. Thin tunics dyed in cheap, bright colors. Reds that bleed into pink, yellows that look sickly in the lamplight. You're made to wear one that clings tighter than you'd like, its neckline deliberately low. The madam adjusts it herself, tugging at the fabric until she nods, satisfied. "Pretty," she says flatly. though the word feels less like praise and more like inventory management. By midday, you're led into the main room of the brothel, and the sight nearly makes you stumble. It's dimly lit by a scattering of smoky oil lamps, with walls painted in garish frescoes of mythical lovers and half-draped goddesses. Except the paint is chipped, and the plaster beneath crumbles in places, giving the whole place a shabby, desperate air. Low couches line the room, covered in cushions that have absorbed far too many years of sweat and wine spills. The scent is overwhelming, a mixture of sour drink, human musk, and incense burning in an attempt to disguise it. The madam gives you the tour, though she hardly needs to. You'll sit here, she points to a bench against the wall, until called. You'll pour drinks when asked, and when chosen, you'll go where directed. Her voice doesn't waver. It's been repeated too many times, carved into her routine like a well-worn path. As evening approaches, the first patrons arrive. Men in togas with stained hems, their sandals dusty from the streets. They laugh too loudly, already drunk on cheap wine before they even step through the door. One claps the madam on the back as though they're old friends, and she returns the gesture with a smile that never reaches her eyes. Coins clink as payment is handed over, and then the men turn toward you and the others. Their gazes sweep over you like butcher's knives, sizing up cuts of meat. You are called forward almost immediately. One of the men pats the cushion beside him, and the madam pushes you toward it before you can hesitate. You sit stiffly, trying to steady your breathing, but he hooks an arm around your shoulders, pulling you close, his laughter booming in your ear. He reeks of sour wine and roasted garlic. And here's the cruel irony. Romans were deeply pragmatic about brothels. They didn't hide them away, they regulated them. In fact, some historians note that brothels had to pay taxes, their profits openly acknowledged by the state. It wasn't a shadow trade, it was a business, with ledgers, contracts, and government oversight. Historians still argue whether this regulation reduced abuse or simply legitimized it. For you, the answer is obvious. The state doesn't care whether you live or die, only that the coins keep flowing. The man jokes loudly with his companions, pulling you closer, pressing a cup into your hand. "Drink," he says, and when you hesitate, his smile tightens. You sip, the sourness burning your throat. They laugh again, slapping the table, as though your discomfort is the entertainment they came for. You force a smile. It feels alien on your face, stiff and trembling. The older woman's warning echoes in your mind. Smile, no matter what. Eventually, the madam signals, and you're led into a smaller room off the main hall. The air here is hotter, heavier, with the faint sound of revelry still leaking through the walls. The man follows, stumbling a little, but his grip on your arm is unyielding. The door shuts, and the world narrows to the dim lamplight and the smell of wine on his breath. This is your initiation. The first night. The moment every woman in the dormitory dreaded for you because they all remember their own. The madam doesn't knock, doesn't check. She doesn't have to. She knows what happens here. The details blur, not because they're absent, but because your mind retreats as a defense. You focus on the lamp flame, on the cracks in the plaster, on the distant echo of laughter. You remember a story you once overheard about crocodile dung being used as ancient contraception. A strange, absurd detail, but clinging to it keeps your mind from shattering under the weight of the present. And as dark humor goes, you almost chuckle. Better crocodile dung than this. When it's over, the man lurches to his feet, tosses a coin onto the low table, and leaves without a backward glance. The metal clinks loudly in the silence, as though mocking you. The madam enters a moment later, scoops it up, and doesn't even look at you. You are dismissed back to the bench, where other girls sit with the same hollow stare you now share. Your initiation is complete. You are no longer new. You are simply one of them. You wake before the light, not because you want to, but because the room itself is already awake. Coughs overlap with whispers, and straw rustles under shifting bodies. A lamp sputters in the corner like a tiny, irritated dragon. If last night baptized you into this life, this morning teaches you what it means to live in a crowd. Privacy is gone. Intimacy is measured in elbows, knees, and breath that isn't yours. During the night, someone new has arrived. She's curled near your feet, both hands clamped on the iron collar around her neck as though she can squeeze it into vanishing. Your mat has been pushed 3 inches toward the wall to make room. 3 inches. That's the scale of generosity here. You notice your sandals have been tucked neatly against a beam, pointing toward the door like 2 little animals eager to escape. You whisper to them, "Not today." It's a weak joke, but jokes cost nothing, and they keep the mind from unraveling. Breakfast clatters in with no ceremony. A slave lugs a pot of barley porridge, another sets down watered wine, and a third drops a basket of rock-hard rolls. The older woman across from you splashes wine on hers and raises it like a toast. "Vintage," she says with mock solemnity. And for one moment, the room allows itself laughter. You chew the porridge, which tastes like burnt ash and boredom, but you eat anyway. Hunger is a debt collector. You pay whether you want to or not. The madam's assistant makes his rounds, stylus tapping against a wax tablet. Click, click, click. Each sound records bodies, collars, mats. He scolds 2 women whose bedding overlaps the central path. "Keep the aisle clear. Patrons tour at dusk." The words make your stomach twist. He moves on without waiting for acknowledgement. To him, you are amphorae-lined neatly in storage. Inventory with pulses. Mainstream fact, Rome was built on crowds. Insulae, towering apartment blocks, stacked families like crates, and brothels often claimed their ground floors. Rooms were so tight that a cubiculum could be no wider than the bed inside. Fires were common, collapses inevitable. The law tried to regulate it, poets joked about it, and builders threw up another staircase anyway. You don't need a law scroll to tell you how fragile this place is. The cracked ceiling beam above your mat tells you daily. Water is rationed. You and 2 others haul a clay jar to the courtyard cistern, lowering the chained bucket until your arms ache. The wall nearby is a patchwork of graffiti. "Cornelia loves Lucius." "Aulus owes me 4 denarii." And the eternal favorite, "Felix was here." You almost smile. Felix has better branding than most emperors. Together you lug the jar back upstairs, muscles burning, and pour out careful sips for the dormitory. One girl shows you a tiny bronze charm, a winged phallus strung on a strip of leather. The Romans call it a fascinum, a charm against the evil eye. They hang them in doorways, gift them to children, and etch them into amulets. Here, it's passed hand to hand like a temporary shield. The newest girl ties it around her neck, and for a moment, her breath steadies. Superstition, maybe, but superstition can be another word for survival. You begin learning the rules of this place. The corner by the window belongs to a woman with a rattling cough. If you ask her name, she just says, "Today." On the shelf by the door sits a miniature marketplace, a lump of red ochre for lips and cheeks, 2 bone needles, a twist of wool, a shard of bronze for a mirror, and even a small jar of goose fat, medicine for cracked skin in winter. "We are our own pharmacy," the older woman mutters, "also our own customers." When the latrine bucket arrives, the room shifts into practiced choreography. People avert their eyes, study the ceiling, trace their own fingers. Someone mutters, "At least the bucket keeps regular hours." The laughter is quiet, but real. You learn quickly that dignity here is not a location, but a posture, a stubborn straightening of your back, even when circumstances shove you down. By midday, the heat thickens. Smells layer over one another: lamp smoke, wool, sour wine, vinegar for cleaning. The madam allows the shutters to crack open, and daylight slices across the mats. Street sounds rush in, hawkers praising figs, a mule stamping, a mother scolding her child in a sing-song tone. The ordinariness hurts more than anything. The world outside continues as though you never existed. Carpenters arrive with hammers to repair a broken bedstead. They chatter about yesterday's Circus Maximus races, about a reckless charioteer from the greens, and a bet lost. You long to answer, to say, "The blues always choke at the turns," just to sound like yourself again. But silence is safer. People with keys don't answer questions from people in collars. Rumors drift in. The aediles, magistrates in charge of markets, are making rounds, checking weights, and recording prostitutes for taxes. Yes, prostitution could be registered. Some women's names were inscribed into official rolls, their earnings taxed by the state. Historians still argue whether prostitutes had to wear the male toga as a mark of shame, or whether that's just a story that stuck. You look at your thin tunic and try to picture yourself in stiff wool, muttering, "Fashion Week in hell." The joke almost makes you laugh, but not quite. At dusk, the assistant brings out a box of bronze discs, small tokens stamped with numbers and erotic scenes. "Spintrii," whispers one woman. Customers use them to prepay, redeeming them for time. Another shakes her head. "They're gaming tokens, nothing to do with us." Historians still argue whether they belong to brothels or amphitheaters. You don't have the luxury of debate, you just hear metal clink and know it means work. The dormitory transforms into a backstage. Hair is braided, cheeks dabbed with ochre, lips touched with wine for color. You smooth the tunic of the newest girl and whisper, "Smile, it helps." The words taste like iron in your mouth. She nods anyway. The madam calls the assignments. Who pours, who plays the lyre, who sits waiting. You are handed a pitcher. Relief flares. Tonight you'll pour, not vanish into the back rooms. "If they ask for Falernian," another woman murmurs, "give them the house red and swear it was raised by Falernian wolves." You almost grin. Rome believes anything if it's said loudly enough. A lamp is lit beneath a painted Venus, incense fizzing upward. Even here, offerings are made. You add your own prayer, small and quiet. Let tonight pass like a shadow. The bell at the front door tinkles, and sandals scuff in. Voices swell, coins clink, laughter spikes. You lift the pitcher, force a steady smile, and step forward into the crowd. You move like clockwork now, a cog in a wheel you never agreed to build. Pour the wine, refill the cups, laugh at the jokes, even when you don't understand them. The men's voices blend into one another, loud, slurred, thick with arrogance and garlic. Their laughter is an avalanche, rolling over the room until you can barely hear your own thoughts. You grip the pitcher tighter, careful not to spill. Last night taught you that spilling earns a slap. The night drags, but eventually the lamps burn low, the patrons stagger out, and the madam counts her coins with the precision of a banker. Then, finally, silence. A silence thick enough to settle on your shoulders like a cloak. You crawl back to your straw mat and collapse. But collapse doesn't mean sleep, because tomorrow will be the same, and the day after. The cycle doesn't end. It repeats until you forget there was ever a before. The next morning begins with work again. You think maybe you'll have a moment to yourself, but no. The madam claps her hands sharply. Up to work! Work means not just the evening's entertainment, it means preparing the brothel itself. You sweep the floors, hauling dust into corners where it will only resettle. You scrub wine stains from cushions that smell like 1,000 yesterdays. You haul water, polish lamps, and even rub down the frescoes so they'll shine when torchlight hits them. It's endless. When you think you're finished, someone finds another task. The madam's sharp eyes miss nothing. Straighten that mat, replace that reed screen. Even the air smells of fatigue, like sweat baked into stone. You learn quickly. Rome never wastes labor. Every moment of your day is filled. The brothel doesn't rest because the city doesn't rest. Bread ovens fire before dawn, markets spill into streets, and chariots thunder at the circus by midday. And you mop up the aftermath of other people's fun. There's no escape in routine either. Sometimes you hear someone humming a tune as they work, a lullaby from childhood maybe, and you ache with the memory of your own. You almost hum along, but the sound dies in your throat. What good is song when your hands are raw from scrubbing? And yet, Romans had a strange relationship with labor. Free citizens thought work with the hands was degrading, best left to slaves. Philosophers argued about it. Cicero once said, "All hired work is servile." Historians still argue whether he was exaggerating, but you know firsthand. Here, work isn't honorable. It's punishment disguised as necessity. By midday, you've been put on laundry duty. That means dragging armfuls of soiled tunics and sheets to the back, where a giant vat of urine waits. Yes, urine. Roman laundries, full honesty, used it to bleach fabrics. You plunge the linens in, stirring them with a wooden paddle while your stomach twists. The acrid stench burns your eyes. You mutter to yourself, "Well, at least we'll all smell equally disgusting." That's joke number one. It barely makes you smile, but it counts. The cycle doesn't stop at cleaning. Food prep is next. Barley ground into mash. Onions chopped until your eyes sting worse than the urine fumes. You carry jars of watered wine upstairs, making trip after trip until your arms tremble. Your back feels like it's splitting in two. Still, the work goes on. Night falls again, and the cycle shifts into its second phase, serving, smiling, enduring. You're assigned to sit near the entrance, a lure for the patrons. The madam tells you, laugh when they enter. Laughter makes them thirsty. Thirst makes them spend. So you laugh, sometimes at nothing at all. Your laughter feels like a foreign object lodged in your throat. Patrons file in. A pair of soldiers slap each other on the back, boasting about their latest patrol. One brags about chasing down a runaway slave, and your stomach clenches as you imagine his words applied to you. Another man arrives with a jug already in hand, demanding more before he's even seated. You pour and pour again. The cycle is liquid, endless. A patron asks you to sing. You hesitate, and he frowns. The madam's glance cuts you like a knife, so you open your mouth and let the first tune that comes to mind spill out. A lullaby, simple and trembling. The men chuckle, one of them muttering, "She sings like a sparrow choking on crumbs." They roar with laughter. You smile through it. Inside, you imagine hurling the wine jug at his head. That's joke number two. You mutter to yourself, "Bet I could knock him out in one swing." Later, you're sent to clean up a spilled cup. As you kneel, a patron drops a coin onto the floor and tells you to fetch it with your teeth. The others laugh, and you freeze, but the madam nods sharply. So you do it, cheeks burning, metal cold between your lips. When you hand it back, the man waves you off like you're an amusing dog. That night, you whisper to the girl beside you, "At least dogs get patted after tricks." Joke number three. Neither of you laugh. And still, the cycle turns. Clean, serve, smile, endure. The dormitory fills with exhausted bodies again. The straw smells worse. Your arms ache more. Your throat is raw from forced laughter. You lie there staring at the ceiling beam again. Only now you count not the cracks, but the nights. One night down. 10, 20, 100 to go. Time blurs. You can't mark days anymore, only shifts in the cycle. Dawn means labor. Dusk means service. Midnight means collapse. Each day erases the one before. And you realize this is the true punishment. Not the chains, not even the men. It's the cycle itself, endless, unrelenting, grinding you down until even your memory of freedom wears smooth, like a coin handled too often. Morning begins before your eyes even open because the smell wakes you first. It isn't the clean scent of dawn or bread baking in a street oven. It's the stench of the room itself, multiplied by heat and bodies. Sweat, unwashed hair, yesterday's wine vomited into a bucket, incense burned down to ash. You gag quietly because the last thing you need is to draw attention before the day even starts. The madam barges in with her assistant, who claps his hands as though you are livestock that needs rousing. Up, up, he says, and the word is too cheerful for what follows. You push yourself upright, straw sticking to your arms. One of the women coughs harshly, spitting into a rag. No one reacts. It's background noise now, as ordinary as breathing. You're assigned cleaning duty again, only this time, it isn't cushions or floors. It's the latrine pit. The assistant hands you a bucket and a wooden scoop, his nose wrinkling as if the smell insults him personally, though he's not the one about to kneel beside it. The stench rises immediately, choking, a mixture of ammonia, rot, and hopelessness. You scoop, dump, until you wonder if your own lungs will climb out of your chest to escape. Somewhere in the back of your head, a bitter joke sparks. At least I can say I've been deep in Roman culture. That's your first joke for the day, whispered only to yourself. The brothel's corridors stink too, no matter how much vinegar and herbs are scattered about. You've heard that wealthy Romans wore little bags of mint or rosemary around their necks to mask the odors of the city. Here, no one bothers. The stink is part of the trade, as natural as coin or wine. By midday, the first customers drift in, merchants finishing their business in the forum, laborers flushed with pay from the docks. The air grows thick with the smell of sour sweat, spiced sausages from street vendors, and spilled cheap wine. You carry trays between them, trying not to inhale too deeply, though it's impossible to avoid. This is when you realize the brothel is a cage made of odors as much as chains. They stick to your hair, your skin, your clothes. Even when you wash, the smell returns within hours. You could walk through the street, and strangers would know where you came from without asking. That's part of the humiliation. The scent itself is a brand. Some Roman writers sneered at this openly. Juvenal, the satirist, joked about the filth of brothels, about women whose perfumes could not mask the reek of their profession. Historians still argue whether he exaggerated for comic effect or simply wrote down what everyone already knew. For you, there's no debate. You're living inside the punchline. In the corner of the common room, a mouse darts across the floor and disappears into a crack in the wall. For 1 second, everyone freezes. Then the patrons roar with laughter, pointing, mocking the madam for her shabby establishment. She curses under her breath, then orders one of you to fetch a broom. You chase the mouse away, though a small part of you envies it, the freedom to scurry off, vanish into the night unnoticed. Later, as the lamps are lit, a new group arrives. They smell not of labor or markets, but of oil and perfume. Their sandals are clean, their tunics embroidered. Patrons from the upper classes. They wrinkle their noses at the stale air, one even muttering, "By Hercules, the sewers are sweeter." You smile anyway, because you must. One of them pulls you down beside him. He waves a cup under your nose, the wine so sharp it makes your eyes water. "Drink," he commands. When you hesitate, he tips it himself, the liquid running down your chin and onto your tunic. The men howl with laughter. You force a smile, though inside, you picture shoving the cup down his throat. That's joke number 2, your private revenge fantasy. The night stretches on, the smell intensifying with each spilled drink, each body pressed too close, each laugh that reeks of sour breath. By the time you're dismissed back to the dormitory, your head throbs from it. You collapse onto the straw, staring at the ceiling, and whisper to the girl beside you, "At least when I die, they won't need to burn incense at my funeral." She snorts despite herself. That's joke number 3. In the silence that follows, you realize the truth. The brothel doesn't just trap you in walls and chains. It traps you in its stench, a miasma that clings even when you dream. And you will dream of it, because there's no escaping what saturates every breath you take. The stink lingers in your hair when you wake, but today, the humiliation is different. The madam announces that you'll be placed in the common room as decoration. Not to pour wine, not to clean, not even to play the lyre, just to sit, smile, and pretend you're enjoying every second of this theater. She calls it performing, you call it something else. You're dressed in a tunic dyed garishly red, the kind that bleeds color when touched by sweat. Around your neck she smears oil with a faint rose scent, meant to trick patrons into thinking you're desirable rather than desperate. Your cheeks are rouged with a smudge of ochre, your lips tinted with crushed mulberries. You catch your reflection in a bronze mirror and almost laugh. The paint is supposed to make you alluring, but all you see is a mask. At least the circus clowns get paid better, you mutter under your breath. Joke number 1. The madam arranges you on a low couch beneath a fresco of Venus, her painted smile mocking yours. The patrons arrive slowly, lounging on cushions, tossing coins on the table like dice. You sit with your hands in your lap, your smile stretched taut. Each time their eyes sweep over you, you force a laugh at their jokes, even when the words sting like wasp bites. This is the game. You must pretend. Pretend to want their touch, their words, their laughter. Pretend that their insults don't splinter inside you. Pretend that this is choice and not command. One man asks you to sing, but this time you choose a playful tune you overheard in the forum. It's about a baker whose bread rose higher than his ego. The patrons laugh at the song, at you, at nothing in particular. Their amusement isn't yours to measure. You're the entertainment, the joke, the stage itself. Here's the fact the Romans themselves never hid. Brothels were often decorated like miniature theaters. Some even had painted signs outside advertising actors. In a way, you are an actor now, except your stage is small, your lines unscripted, and your audience drunk. Historians still argue whether Romans considered this performance a form of art or just another indulgence. But from where you sit, pressed into the couch until your back aches, it is neither. It is survival masquerading as comedy. A patron leans close, breath heavy with wine, and whispers, "Smile wider, little sparrow." You obey, though the corners of your mouth burn. He pinches your cheek, declaring to his friends, "See, she loves it." The room erupts in laughter, as though your forced grin is the punchline of the evening. Inside, your thoughts hiss, "If I smile any wider, my jaw will break." Joke number 2. Later, another demands that you pour wine into his mouth while he reclines. You tilt the jug carefully, watching the liquid splash onto his chin and tunic. He laughs, wiping his face with his sleeve, and slaps your thigh as though you've done something charming. The others join in, clapping, jeering, egging him on. You force another laugh, softer this time, like a well-trained echo. One of the older women slips onto the couch beside you, brushing her hand lightly across your arm, as though steadying you. To the patrons, it looks like camaraderie. To you, it feels like rescue. Her whisper barely carries, "Don't let them see you crack." You nod, holding the smile until your cheeks ache. The hours drag. Laughter rises and falls like waves crashing against stone. You think of those waves, how Roman engineers built harbors with volcanic ash that hardened underwater, defying the sea. That concrete still survives in ruins today. Your own performance feels the same, hardened, unnatural, enduring longer than you thought possible. Historians marvel at Roman concrete. No one will marvel at your endurance. At one point, a patron demands you dance. The lyre strikes up, out of tune, and you rise, moving in slow, awkward circles. You remember no choreography, only that you must sway your hips, lift your arms, let your hair fall loose. The men cheer as though you're an acrobat. You stumble once, catching yourself, and quip silently in your head, "Careful, I charge extra for falling." Joke number 3. When at last the night ends, you retreat to the dormitory. The rouge has smeared across your cheeks, the oil has turned rancid on your skin, and the garish red tunic clings uncomfortably. You collapse on your mat, exhausted not from labor, but from pretending. Pretending takes more energy than hauling water or scrubbing floors ever could. Around you, the other women settle, their faces blank, their silence louder than laughter. You wonder if they too carry private jokes, whispered only in their own heads, tiny shields against the crushing weight of performance. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the painted Venus swims in your mind, smiling forever in her chipped fresco. You almost envy her, immortal in plaster, never needing to smile on command. The dormitory is still dark when the first cries begin. You jolt awake, thinking at first someone is ill, but the sound is sharper than coughing, more like the crack of leather against skin. The madam's assistant is already in the room, whip in hand, his face set in a mask of irritation. A girl 2 mats away has refused to rise. Maybe she's too sick to move. Maybe she's too tired to care. Either way, the lash cuts across her shoulders. She cries out, curling against the wall, but the whip snaps again until she drags herself upright, trembling. The assistant doesn't look angry so much as efficient, as if punishment is just another item on his morning checklist. You've heard whispers about discipline here, but seeing it feels different. The whip leaves red lines across her back that glisten in the lamplight. You want to look away, but you can't. The other women don't move to help. They know better. Any attempt at kindness earns extra lashes. The rule is simple: obedience or pain. Later, when the room has emptied into chores, you catch the girl's eye. She doesn't cry anymore. She just mouths one word: don't. And you understand. Don't resist. Don't question. Don't give them reason. Resistance here isn't heroic. It's suicidal. That evening, the madam lays down new rules. A patron has complained about poor service, so tonight she demands exaggerated enthusiasm. Laugh louder, she orders. Pour faster. Smile always. Anyone who fails will be punished in front of the others. She calls it discipline by example. You already know what that means. When the patrons arrive, the air tightens with expectation. You pour wine, your hands steady, your smile practiced. One man slaps your back hard enough to sting, and you force out a laugh, praying it sounds genuine. Another insists you sing again. You do, voice cracking on the high note, but the men cheer anyway, more interested in the effort than the music. Across the room, the girl who was whipped earlier spills wine on a patron's tunic. The man shouts, shoving her to the ground. The room hushes, every patron waiting to see how the madam will react. She doesn't disappoint. She drags the girl into the center of the room, orders her assistant to strip her tunic to the waist, and the lash sings again. 1, 2, 3, each strike punctuated by laughter from the patrons. The punishment has become part of the entertainment. Here's the fact. Roman law gave owners nearly limitless power over their slaves. Beatings, brandings, starvation, all were legal. Some philosophers wrote about treating slaves with moderation, but historians still argue whether these were moral appeals or just empty words. From where you sit, watching the whip slice the air, moderation feels like a myth. And then comes the humiliation. The madam forces the girl to kneel, kiss the patron's sandal, and beg forgiveness. The man grins, soaking up the moment like a senator basking in applause. Only when he is satisfied does the madam pull her back, tossing her into the dormitory with a warning. Let this be the last mistake. You want to rush to her, to offer a touch of comfort, but you freeze, because you know the eyes in this room are everywhere. Comfort could be seen as defiance, so you do nothing. And the nothing feels heavier than the whip. Later, back in the dormitory, the girl lies curled on her mat, back striped with welts. No one speaks, but one woman quietly slides half her roll of bread across the floor toward her. It isn't much, but it's something. Small acts of defiance survive where open rebellion cannot. That night, you whisper your own bitter joke into the straw. At least whips don't charge extra for their services. Joke number 1. It makes you smile for half a second before the silence swallows it. The next day brings a different punishment. A woman caught dozing on her shift is denied food. She sits in the corner of the dormitory, lips cracked, stomach growling audibly. The madam passes her by without a glance, as if hunger itself were part of the discipline. By evening, she's so faint that 2 others must carry her to the common room. The patrons laugh, saying, "The poor thing dances like she's drunk already." This is the pattern. Lash, starvation, humiliation. Not every day, but enough to keep everyone afraid. And fear, you realize, is the true leash here. Stronger than chains, heavier than collars. Sometimes the punishments are almost absurd. One patron demands that a girl sing with a reed pipe while standing on one leg. She stumbles, of course, and earns a slap for the failure. You whisper to yourself, well, at least they don't ask us to juggle flaming amphorae. Joke number 2. You nearly laugh, but catch yourself in time. Even laughter is risky. Too much, and it looks false. Too little, and it looks defiant. You live in the narrow space between. At night, the madam inspects the dormitory. She notes who's sick, who's bruised, who's thin. Not because she cares, but because damaged goods bring less coin. She snaps at one woman for limping, warning that buyers expect quality. Quality, as though you were a cracked amphora, not a person. And here's the fringe detail. Some Roman brothels branded slaves with marks. Tiny letters burned into the skin to show ownership. You glance at your collar and wonder if the brand will come next. Historians still argue how widespread the practice was, but in this place, you believe anything is possible. That night, as you lie awake, you realize the whip is not the worst part, nor is hunger, nor the shame. The worst part is the silence that follows, the way no one speaks, the way even compassion must be hidden like contraband. That silence eats at you more than the lash ever could, so you invent another joke, whispered into the dark. Maybe tomorrow they'll punish us by making us rest. Joke number 3. You almost chuckle, but the sound dies in your throat. The lash may fade, the hunger may ease, but the silence stays. The morning begins not with chores, but with rumors. Whispers ripple through the dormitory like a draft. Someone heard of a girl who was freed. A patron supposedly paid her manumission fee and granted her liberty. She walks the streets now with her head uncovered, one woman says, like any freeborn. Another shakes her head. Stories. Always stories. The word freedom tastes strange even in whispers. It seems like a word that belongs to someone else, like senator or patrician. But you can't help listening. The idea plants itself in your chest, fluttering faintly against your ribs like a bird testing its wings. The madam notices the shift immediately. She strides into the dormitory, eyes sharp, voice cutting. "Forget the tales," she snaps. "You belong here until I decide otherwise. Freedom is for citizens, not for you." Her words land like stones, crushing whatever sparks of hope had flickered. And yet, the whispers continue. Later, while scrubbing cups, one of the older women tells you, "It isn't impossible. Some patrons do it, if they fall in love, if they're foolish, if they're rich enough to waste coin." She shrugs. But don't count on it. Hope is a heavier chain than iron. You carry her words with you through the day. In the common room that night, a wealthy patron enters, a man with rings on every finger, his toga bright with purple trim. He orders wine, demands music, and then gestures at you. "That one," he says, his voice thick with authority. You feel every eye on you as the madam ushers you forward, her smile as polished as her coins. The man is different from the usual patrons. He doesn't stink of garlic or cheap wine. He speaks smoothly, asks your name, though he doesn't care about the answer, and even compliments your hair. For one ridiculous moment you wonder, is this the kind of man who might grant freedom? But as the night drags on, the illusion cracks. He laughs too loudly at your forced jokes, orders you to sing again and again, then pulls you close with a grip that bruises. His politeness was just seasoning sprinkled over the same dish. When he leaves, tossing coins like crumbs, the madam beams. You, however, know better. Hope is a trick, and tricks hurt worse than lashes. Here's the fact. Some slaves in Rome were freed. Manumission was real, and freed slaves, liberty, could sometimes earn status, property, even respect. But historians still argue how often it happened for prostitutes. The records are thin, the examples rare. For every story of freedom, there were thousands whose names vanished into dust. You return to the dormitory with these thoughts gnawing at you. A girl beside you whispers, "When I'm free, I'll sell bread near the forum. Fresh bread every morning." Another adds, "I'll walk to the Tiber and wash whenever I please." Their voices sound like children making wishes at a festival. You try to join them, though your throat feels tight. I'll sleep until sunrise." The words come out cracked, but they all nod as though it's a noble dream. Maybe it is. The next day brings another kind of cruelty. The promise of choice. The madam gathers you all, declaring that the best performing women will earn special consideration. She hints that good behavior, obedience, charm, all of these could make you valuable enough for a patron to buy outright. She doesn't say freedom, but the word hovers in the air like incense. You know the truth. It's bait. A way to make you laugh harder, smile wider, obey quicker. Yet part of you still clings to it. That's the worst part, knowing the lie and still wanting to believe it. That night, while pouring wine for another round of sweaty merchants, you whisper to yourself, "Maybe if I smile wide enough, they'll set me free. Or maybe my jaw will just dislocate first." That's joke number 1. Later, you hear one of the patrons boasting about buying a slave for his household. He brags about the girl's obedience, her cooking, her loyalty. Another man replies, "Better than wasting coin on a harlot." They laugh, tossing dice across the table. You think bitterly, maybe if I cook stew in my tunic, they'll reconsider. Joke number 2. Back in the dormitory, the rumors return. One girl swears she saw a former brothel worker married to a freedman. Another insists the government bans such things. The debates spiral until someone finally mutters, "None of it matters. We're here. That's all." The silence after is heavy. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling beams, and whisper a third joke into the straw. "If I ever get free, I'll miss this straw bed," said no one, ever. Joke number 3. The truth settles in slowly, like damp creeping up a wall. Freedom exists, yes, but not for you. The promises are false, the stories twisted, the hope poisoned. And yet, you cling to them, because what else is there to hold? Hope is both the sweetest fruit and the sharpest blade. And in this place, it cuts every day. The day begins with a cough that doesn't stop. A woman across from you hacks into a rag, and when she pulls it away, the cloth is stained pink. No one says a word, but everyone sees. Illness in this place is both common and dangerous. Common because the air is thick with bodies and smoke. Dangerous because weakness means you're worthless to the madam. You press your face into your straw mat, trying to block the sound, but there's no escaping it. Coughs blend with sneezes, with groans, with whispers of pain. The dormitory has become a ward without a healer. By midday, the sick woman is dragged into the corner and given a jug of vinegar water. That's the medicine here. vinegar for fevers, garlic for infections, honey for wounds. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The madam isn't interested in cures, she's interested in appearances. As long as the patrons don't notice, sickness doesn't matter. Disease stalks the brothel like a silent customer who never leaves. Lice infest your hair. Fleas bite at your ankles until you scratch them raw. One girl discovers scabs on her arms that won't heal. Another burns with fever so high she shivers in her sleep. You watch it spread and wonder how long until it reaches you. The Romans weren't ignorant about disease, though their cures often bordered on absurd. A mainstream fact, Pliny the Elder recommended wearing a dead toad in a pouch to ward off fevers. Others suggested smearing goose fat on wounds or drinking wine mixed with ashes. Historians still argue whether these remedies helped at all or were just elaborate placebos. But here, superstition feels like medicine. You even see it in the dormitory. One girl ties a sprig of laurel above her mat, claiming Apollo will protect her lungs. Another smears ash across her forehead, whispering it will draw out the heat. You know it's nonsense, and yet you find yourself fingering the little bronze charm someone once showed you, the winged phallus, meant to ward off evil. You hold it tighter now, as though it might keep sickness away. The patrons bring their own infections. Men stumble in with sores on their lips, rashes on their arms, coughing between drinks. They don't care, and the madam doesn't dare refuse them. You serve them wine anyway, all the while thinking, if death is contagious, then so is coin. One night, you're called into a back room with a patron who reeks of sweat and sickness. His breath rattles, his skin blotched with angry spots. You hesitate, and he laughs, saying, "Don't worry, little dove, I'm not contagious." The irony burns as hot as his fevered skin. You whisper to yourself, "Sure, and I'm the Empress of Rome." That's joke number one. Later, when you return to the dormitory, the girl beside you asks, "What was he like?" You answer honestly, "Like sleeping beside a collapsing aqueduct." Joke number two, she snorts, covering her mouth to hide the laugh. The truth is, disease is as much a master here as the madam. It dictates who works, who suffers, who vanishes, and vanish they do. One morning, the coughing woman is simply gone. No one asks, no one tells. Her mat is rolled up, her straw scattered. Someone else lies there by nightfall. That's how quickly memory is erased. A fringe tidbit. Some Romans believed certain diseases were punishments from Venus herself, goddess of love. Brothels were thought to be cursed places, breeding grounds of divine wrath. You don't know if that's true, but sometimes when the air grows heavy with fever and blood, you almost believe it. You wonder if Venus watches, disgusted, or if she simply turns away. By the end of the week, half the dormitory coughs. The madam tries to hide it with heavier incense, but the stench of sickness cuts through. Patrons wrinkle their noses, yet they keep coming. Coins still clink into bowls, and so the cycle continues. One evening, as you sit on the low couch, a patron remarks on your pale face. You force a laugh and say, "Pale is fashionable this season, matches the marble statues." That's joke number three. He chuckles, thinking you witty, but you're only hiding the truth. The sickness has begun in you too. Your throat burns, your chest tightens. You swallow the cough, swallow the fear, swallow the knowledge that in this place, illness doesn't mean rest. It means replacement. You lie awake that night, sweat chilling your skin, and realize the horrifying truth. In the brothel, disease isn't an intruder. It's part of the furniture. And sooner or later, it will claim you too. The air in the dormitory is thick tonight, not just with sickness, but with whispers. A woman kneels by the flickering lamp, hands clasped, murmuring a prayer to Venus. Another rubs a small clay figurine of Priapus, the god of fertility, muttering words too soft to catch. One girl drops oil into the flame and whispers, "If the goddess favors me, tomorrow will be easier." You watch all this and feel the weight of it pressing in. Religion here isn't about temples or processions, it's about desperation. The women cling to gods and charms the way drowning sailors clutch driftwood. The madam encourages it, oddly enough. She allows a little altar in the corner of the common room, decorated with wilting flowers, scraps of bread, and broken figurines. She claims it keeps spirits up. You know the truth. It keeps obedience up. Faith is cheaper than whips. One night, a patron insists on taking you to the altar. He staggers forward, pulling you by the arm, and demands you offer a prayer aloud while he watches. You freeze, unsure what to say. He laughs, slurring, "Ask Venus for sweeter lips, little dove." The others roar with laughter, slapping the table. You force a smile and whisper a prayer to the goddess, not for beauty, but for escape. Inside your head, you mutter, "Maybe Venus is too busy to answer. She's got statues to polish." That's joke number 1. Later, back in the dormitory, a girl shows you a scrap of parchment with scribbles on it. She insists it's a curse tablet, meant to bind an enemy. "I'll bury it under the threshold," she says, "and the madam will fall ill." You don't know whether to laugh or believe. Historians still argue about the power Romans placed in these curse tablets, whether they were superstition or social protest. Here, they feel like both. Superstition mixes with survival. Someone hangs garlic by the window to ward off evil spirits. Another carries a pebble she swears was struck by lightning, powerful against fevers. You even find yourself rubbing your bronze charm at night, whispering to no one in particular. It's strange how quickly you learn to believe in things you once mocked. The patrons notice too. Some demand that you join them in mock rituals, pouring wine on the floor as sacrifice, or pretending to divine fortunes from the shapes of spilled oil. You play along, laughing when they laugh, bowing when they clap. One patron even insists you call him Mars, while he struts across the room, a cushion tied to his chest like armor. You whisper to yourself, "Mars of the cushions, protector of drunken fools." Joke number 2. And here's a mainstream fact. Roman religion was everywhere. Gods for the hearth, gods for the crossroads, gods for door hinges and drains. They sacrificed animals at festivals, left offerings at shrines, and inscribed prayers onto lead tablets before tossing them into wells. You realize the brothel is just another shrine, coins the offerings, bodies the sacrifices. Historians still argue whether prostitution was ever considered sacred service, but living it, you know, nothing here is holy. One evening, a philosopher wanders in with his students. He doesn't drink, doesn't laugh. Instead, he debates loudly about whether the gods punish prostitutes or whether society creates its own shame. His students nod and scribble notes while you stand nearby, holding a jug of wine no one drinks. Finally, he gestures at you and says, "Here is proof. Vice incarnate." You want to smash the jug over his head. Instead, you smile, whispering under your breath, "Glad to be your footnote, Professor." Joke number 3. Later, lying on your straw mat, you stare at the ceiling beams and wonder if the gods are watching at all. Do they hear the prayers? Do they notice the curses? Or do they look away, busy with temples and processions while you rot in a painted cage? The truth is, you don't know. Maybe faith is real. Maybe it's just another trick to keep you quiet. But you whisper one last prayer anyway. Not to Venus, not to Priapus, not to Mars of the cushions, just to anyone listening. Let me live one more day. And for now, that feels like the only religion left. Morning creeps in with the gray light past the shutters, and before anyone shuffles to the water jar, you hear a new kind of visitor in the common room. A voice that doesn't slur. It carries like a stylus scratching wax. Precise, pleased with itself. The madam is flattering it the way she flatters gilded coins. "A poet," someone whispers. Or worse, a philosopher with an audience. You're summoned to complete the atmosphere. That means sit, pour, smile, and, if asked, recite. The man at the center wears none of the usual stains. His tunic is clean, his hair curled, and his fingers drum a rhythm. Students cluster around him with tablets. He studies you the way a cook studies a fish before seasoning it. He declaims about virtue and vice, the city rotting from its pleasures. When the students hum appreciatively, he nods gravely. Then, with the benevolence of a man tipping a porter, he asks for wine from the amphora that remembers spring. You pour the house red. He doesn't notice. You sit very still and become what he needs, not a person, but a prop. He uses you to illustrate the fall of morals, to warn his boys about desire, to polish a sentence so it shines like a coin. Later he will write you down as an example, a symbol that does not talk back. Inside, you stage a tiny rebellion and think, if I'm a symbol, at least let me be one that charges by the hour. Joke number 1. Mainstream fact. Long before you, Roman writers filled stages with women like you. Plautus and Terence wrote the Meretrix as a stock character, the witty courtesan, the hard-eyed Lena, the swaggering Leno. Historians still argue whether those comic masks softened public cruelty or sharpened it by turning you into a punchline. From your couch, beneath a chipped Venus, you feel the answer in the sore set of your jaw. The poet calls you Thais, because literature loves recycled names. He asks you to laugh at a line that stings, to lean into the lamplight so his students can annotate the curve of your shoulder, the rhetorical gesture of seduction. One boy blushes, another sketches, a third looks bored. You pour more wine and make your face into a quiet mask. When he tires of morality, he trades verses like dice. Juvenal had the right of it, he says, and launches barbs about shabby brothels and women who smell of stale perfume. You inhale lamp smoke and think, congratulations, you've discovered air. Joke number 2. A satirist with inky fingers arrives later, asking for local color. He plies the madam with questions about rates and punishments as if pricing fish. He asks you, without meeting your eyes, what kinds of men come through the door. Hungry ones, you say. He scribbles it down. He will use it tomorrow in a poem that rhymes, and in the poem, you will become the city's stomach with a face. There is, to be fair, another kind of visitor. A young woman with a book roll tucked in her belt asks if you can read. You hesitate. Reading is a dangerous confession. But she smiles and slips you a scrap of verse from Sulpicia, a rare woman's voice in a chorus of men. For a breath, you feel seen, not sketched. Then the scrap is whisked away by the madam, trash on the floor, and the door closes again. Fringe tidbit. The city is sprinkled with little bookstalls where you can rent a scroll for an afternoon, greasy with other people's fingers. Boys rehearse rhetoric in the porticos. Sometimes they drift to doorways like this one, reciting to girls who have no time for verbs. Once, a wag offered to pay you not for an hour, but for a simile. You tried, like a ship in a sewer, and he howled, insisting you'd stolen it from Lucilius, if only. In the afternoon, the Aedile's clerk appears, counting heads and coins for taxes. He writes Meretrix beside a set of names as if noting varieties of olives, quotes a regulation about brothel locations, then squints at a shutter. Rome can enumerate your breath, but not your name. Historians still argue whether the famous vectigal on sex work was consistent citywide or just an accountant's fantasy. You know this much. The sums always add up against you. At dusk, a stoic with a beard like a broom proclaims that true freedom is inner, that even a slave can be virtuous. The students murmur, the madam nods, the coins keep coming. You hold the jug and wonder if virtue stops welts from stinging or coughs from dragging you under. He quotes Musonius on self-control, and, with the complacence of a man untouched by it all, repeats the old anecdote that Cato the Elder preferred youths to visit brothels rather than seduce respectable wives. You stare at the floor. They ask you sometimes to speak as if you were the city. "What does Rome want?" a boy prompts, stylus poised. You answer, "Rent." He writes it down as satire. You meant the actual rent, on mats, on skin, on time. Later, he will perform the line at dinner and win applause. You will wash cups. Even the graffiti leans scholarly these days. Someone scrawls a hexameter across the back wall and signs it Felix. Because of course he does. The city's most persistent author never sleeps. You add a punctuation mark with a crumb of charcoal, a single dot, your invisible signature, and feel absurdly triumphant. Joke number 3. One day, the future will argue whether your dot is an archaic stop or evidence of a lost epic. Either way, you've published. Night rolls in, thick as the smoke that blurs fresco from fracture. The poet leaves, cheeks wine bright, students buzzing like flies around a fig. The satirist promises to send you a copy of the poem that digests your life into 9 lines. He will forget, you will remember. Back in the dormitory, the women settle like tired syllables, and you lie awake parsing a grammar of survival, subject, object, imperative. You think of earlier rumors that crocodile dung concoctions could change fate, and snort softly because the most powerful magic you've seen is still a sharpened word. But the words in this quarter are caged. They circle, they preen, they perch on your shoulder and fly away signed by someone else. Historians still argue whether literature preserved the truth of the streets or merely staged it. You carry the answer like a coin under your tongue. The truth is heavier than rhyme. Before sleep drags you down, you frame one more sentence for the scholars. I am not your symbol. I am the person you stepped on to climb your metaphor. Tomorrow you will pour and smile and nod at another quotation. Tonight you finish the line and let it become a lullaby, a thread you knot around your own name so it doesn't come loose in the dark. By now, you think you've seen every kind of man Rome can throw at you. Merchants loud with coin, soldiers loud with pride, philosophers loud with words. But then come the ones who are quiet, and their quiet is worse. They are the elites, the powerful, the men whose sandals are so clean you wonder if they even touch the ground. They don't stumble in, they glide. They don't shout for wine, they murmur, and the madam rushes to obey as if the gods themselves have walked through her door. The air changes when they arrive. Even the other patrons seem to shrink back, as though their laughter might offend these men who carry authority like a cloak. You're chosen that night without even being asked. One of them simply points. The madam claps her hands, and suddenly you're kneeling at his couch, pouring from a jug heavier than your arms can manage. He doesn't look at you. He looks through you, as if you were glass, and the coins he's already paid are more real than your flesh. He asks for a performance, not just you, but 3 others. You're lined up, instructed to act out a scene from a play he saw at the theater. One of the other women mutters under her breath, "Which role do you want me to be? The tragic chorus or the stage prop?" Joke number 1. You nearly choke holding in your laugh. The play is ridiculous, some farce about a foolish husband and a clever courtesan. But the men roar with laughter as you stumble through it, your tunics slipping, your bodies rearranged like puppets. They clap their hands, demand improvisation, bark orders like directors who know no one will refuse. It isn't art, but mockery wearing a mask of theater. Here's the fact. Roman elites prided themselves on patronage of the arts. They filled their villas with frescoes, paid poets to recite epics, sponsored plays in the amphitheaters. Historians still argue whether they saw brothel performances as entertainment or humiliation. For you, it's clear. They pay not to be entertained, but to remind you that your dignity is theirs to spend. One man demands you crawl across the floor like a supplicant in a temple. Another insists you sing while balancing a cup of wine on your head. When it slips, spilling across your shoulder, the room erupts in howls. He claps slowly, mockingly, and tells you, "Better luck next time, little sparrow." You smile because you have to, but inside you whisper, "Better luck choking on your own grapes." Joke number 2. The cruelty sharpens when one insists on branding the evening with his seal. He presses his signet ring against your skin, not hot enough to scar, but hard enough to bruise. "Now you belong to me," he says with a smirk. You nod, though inside you rage. The bruise blooms purple, like an ink blot spreading a story you didn't agree to write. The madam, of course, beams. These men bring more coins in one night than a dozen common patrons. She will tolerate any demand, no matter how demeaning. And you are expected to endure it all with a smile. When the men finally leave, the air feels lighter, though your chest feels heavier. You collapse onto the straw later, whispering to the girl beside you, "Imagine if they used all that energy on something useful, like inventing soap." Joke number 3. She snorts into her pillow, and for a moment you both almost laugh like real people again. And yet, the visits continue. Some elites come not for sex, but for power games. One demands you recite his family lineage back to Romulus. He feeds you the names as you go, slapping your arm when you stumble. Another insists on being worshipped as Jupiter, complete with a thunderbolt gesture made from a torch. You kneel and praise him, your voice dripping with irony he never notices. A fringe tidbit. In Rome, powerful men often built private theaters inside their villas, stages for their whims. Some even staged mock gladiator fights with their household slaves. What happens in the brothel is no different, except here, you're both the actor and the arena. Later that week, you overhear the madam boasting to a visitor, "Even senators come here." She says it like a badge of honor, proof of her establishment's prestige. You realize what it means. The most powerful men in Rome know this place. They walk these corridors, and if they wish, they could crush you with a word, as easily as stepping on an insect. That knowledge hangs over you like a shadow. Patrons are bad enough, but patrons with power? They can destroy not just your body, but any memory that you ever existed. That night, lying on your mat, you trace the fading bruise from the signet ring and think about how easily dignity vanishes. Not with lashes, not with hunger, but with laughter. Their laughter. And you whisper into the straw, soft enough that only you can hear. "If they are gods, then Rome is worse off than I thought." The night after the senator's visit, the dormitory feels heavier. Nobody speaks for a long time, as though the laughter of the elites still echoes in the walls. Then, slowly, whispers begin again. Stories, fragments of comfort disguised as conversation. One girl says she once saw a freedwoman in the Forum who had bought her own stall to sell fruit. Another swears she will find a soldier to marry. Most don't believe her, but they let her speak anyway. Dreams are fragile currency here, but they're still exchanged. It's strange how, in this place, even silence binds. You start to notice the rhythms of the women around you, the way one hums when she's scared, the way another braids and unbraids her hair before every shift, the way the older one never lies down fully, but sleeps sitting, back pressed against the wall, as if staying upright is a kind of defiance. You begin to form bonds, small ones. A crust of bread quietly passed across the floor. A whispered joke about the madam's crooked wig. A shared eye roll when a patron brags about owning 3 villas. These moments don't change your fate, but they make the days less unbearable. One afternoon, while sweeping, you discover a piece of charcoal under a bench. You pocket it, and later, on your mat, you draw a small bird on the wall near your head. The girl beside you sees it and smiles. "Sparrow," she whispers, "that's you." You shrug, pretending not to care, But in the morning you notice someone has added a second bird beside it, then a third. Soon, the corner of the dormitory becomes a tiny flock. This is how camaraderie grows, not in loud declarations, but in quiet graffiti, in crumbs of rebellion. Mainstream fact, Roman walls everywhere were covered in graffiti. From Pompeii to Ostia, words scratched into plaster recorded love notes, insults, political slogans, even shopping lists. Historians still argue whether these voices were a form of resistance or just everyday chatter. In your dormitory, the scratched sparrows feel like resistance. But bonds are dangerous. The madam notices when you linger too long with another girl, when your laughter rises above the hum of chores. One evening, she pulls two of you aside. No alliances, she warns. You are mine, not each other's. To her, unity is a threat. Divide and control, that's her real trade. Later, you whisper to the others, at least she's jealous of us for something. Joke number 1. It earns a stifled giggle before silence returns. Betrayal is the shadow that follows every bond. One girl, desperate for better treatment, reports another for hiding bread. The punishment is swift. Lashes in the common room, coins deducted from her worth. The informer earns an extra portion of wine that night. You all see it, and none of you forget. Fringe tidbit. Romans sometimes rewarded informers, even giving them legal protections. In politics, in law, in daily life, betrayal could be profitable. Here, it's survival. You learn quickly to trust quietly, sparingly. A glance, a touch, a hidden drawing, that's as much as you dare. Still, camaraderie finds ways to slip through cracks. Once, during a lull, you and another girl begin humming the same tune. It takes you a moment to realize it's the lullaby your mother once sang. She smiles faintly, finishing the line. You whisper, "How did you know that?" She shrugs. We all had mothers. For a moment, you forget where you are. Another evening, when the patrons demand laughter, you and the girl beside you exchange a look and roll your eyes in perfect sync. You keep your smiles wide, but underneath them, you know you've shared a rebellion. If we keep this up, you whisper later, we'll have to charge extra for comedy. Joke number 2. One night, the newest girl in the dormitory breaks down sobbing. She's too young, too raw, still carrying the smell of her village in her hair. The older women surround her, shushing her softly, combing her hair with their fingers, whispering that it will be easier soon. You add your own comfort. At least the straw doesn't charge rent. It earns a weak chuckle from her, and that's joke number 3. Camaraderie is fleeting, fragile, always under threat, but it exists. It reminds you that you're not just a body in a ledger. You are part of a quiet flock of sparrows, scratching yourselves onto plaster so the world won't forget. And though betrayal lurks, though punishment is constant, you carry those moments with you into the night. A loaf of bread, a humming tune, a bird drawn in charcoal. Tiny rebellions that the madam cannot tax or whip away. You fall asleep staring at the flock above your mat, and for the first time in weeks, you dream not of chains, but of wings. The dream of wings fades with the morning light. What replaces it is the shuffle of sandals outside, the distant creak of carts rolling over stone, and the familiar orders barked down the corridor. Today, though, the routine feels different. The madam announces that a festival crowds the streets, merchants, musicians, and families flooding the city, and she wants her brothel ready to catch the overflow. The shutters are opened wide, the frescoes are scrubbed with vinegar until the paint flakes. Lamps are filled with fresh oil. The madam even burns more incense than usual, though it only layers cinnamon smoke over the sour air. The whole house hums with preparation, like a stage before the curtain rises. For you, the change is cruel. It means the sound of freedom is everywhere. Laughter from children running with festival masks, music drifting from the streets, vendors shouting about roasted nuts and honey cakes. You glimpse it through the cracked shutters. torches bobbing in the dusk, garlands of flowers thrown onto doorposts, a procession chanting to the gods. The world outside glitters, and you are trapped in the painted cage, forced to serve men who come staggering in after the parades. The first patron tonight reeks of triumph. He brags about winning a race at the Circus Maximus, waving his winnings in the air before tossing coins at the madam. He demands you sit on his lap while he counts the money. "Hold still," he commands, pressing the coins against your arms as though weighing you against them. Inside, you whisper, "I'd rather be the coin. It gets to travel." Joke number 1. Later, another patron pulls you toward the shutter, forcing you to peek at the crowds outside. "See how lucky you are?" he sneers. "They work all day, and here you sit in comfort." You almost laugh at the absurdity. Comfort. Your straw mat scratches like sandpaper, your tunic clings with sweat, and your back aches from endless pouring. You mutter under your breath, "Yes, pure luxury. 5 stars. Would recommend." Joke number 2. Mainstream fact. Roman festivals were constant. Saturnalia, Lupercalia, Floralia, each a burst of license, wine, and spectacle. Citizens celebrated with games, masks, even public revelry that sometimes blurred into chaos. Historians still argue whether brothels thrived more during these festivals or whether citizens sought freer pleasures outside. But for you, there's no argument. The festivals mean more patrons, more coins, more exhaustion. You serve until your legs tremble. Patrons roll in flushed with wine and laughter, eager to extend their celebration inside these walls. They treat you as part of the festival. Another act, another indulgence. One insists you wear his laurel wreath while you pour. The leaves scratch your forehead, the twigs dig into your scalp, but you smile as though crowned in gold. Another demands you dance in the common room while he and his friends clap off beat. You sway awkwardly, the music of the street bleeding faintly through the walls. For a moment you let yourself imagine you're outside, part of the parade. Then a patron slaps your hip, jolting you back. You whisper to the girl beside you, "At least the crowds outside get free entertainment." Joke number 3. She hides her laugh behind her hand. The festival continues for days, and with it, the flood of patrons. Sleep becomes a luxury. You collapse onto your straw mat at dawn, only to be roused again by noon. Food is scarce. Crumbs of bread, thin porridge. The madam insists most of the budget go to incense and wine. She says, "The men must not smell sickness." You doze once on your mat, head pressed against the wall, and dream of streets filled with flowers. When you wake, your cheek is marked with the imprint of the plaster. It feels like the city itself mocking you. Flowers outside, cracks inside. Fringe tidbit. Some Romans believed festivals pleased the gods but also unleashed chaos. During Saturnalia, roles were reversed. Masters served slaves, dice were cast openly, and society turned upside down. You think about that inversion as you watch elites toss coins at your feet. If Saturnalia truly reversed roles here, the madam would be on the mat, and you would count the coins. You almost laugh imagining it. Almost. By the end of the festival week, the brothel is drained. The incense has burned low, the frescoes are smeared with smoke, the cushions stink worse than before. But the madam beams at her overflowing coin box. She calls the festival a blessing. For you, it feels more like a curse stretched across too many days. When the shutters finally close again, the silence is startling. No drums, no chanting, no crowds, just the shallow breathing of women collapsing onto their mats. You lie back, staring at your little flock of charcoal sparrows on the wall. For a moment, you imagine them flying through the festival streets, free to perch on statues, free to steal crumbs from vendors, free to vanish into the sky. You whisper, "Lucky birds." And then you sleep, deeper than you have in weeks. The festival has ended, but its echoes linger in the air like smoke that refuses to lift. The shutters close again. The incense burns down, yet the exhaustion does not fade. Your body aches as if the celebration carved itself into your bones. The madam walks the corridor with a smug smile, her coin box heavier than before, her voice sharper from satisfaction. She calls the week a victory. For you, it feels like defeat stretched thin over too many nights. The dormitory is crowded with silence. Women lie on their mats, staring at the ceiling, not speaking, too drained to share even whispers. You trace the flock of sparrows you once drew, noticing how the charcoal smudges with each day. They look blurred now, like birds trying to fly but trapped inside the plaster. You whisper, "Same as us," and joke number 1 barely escapes your lips. Work returns to its brutal rhythm. Without the festival, patrons trickle in more slowly, but that doesn't mean relief. It means the madam squeezes more out of each of you to make up for the loss. She sets stricter quotas, laugh louder, serve faster, entice more. She demands double charm to keep the coins steady, as if smiles could be minted like denarii. One afternoon you're sent with 2 others to fetch water. The cistern is crowded, slaves from other houses hauling buckets, shoulders raw from ropes. You hear gossip. 2 insulae collapsed in the Subura district after festival fires weakened their beams. A reminder that in Rome, danger doesn't need to visit the brothels. It waits outside too. Mainstream fact, insulae fires and collapses were so frequent that laws limited their height, though builders ignored them. Historians still argue whether these restrictions were ever enforced or just words on tablets. You don't need tablets. You need the crack in your own ceiling not to grow. You haul the jar back, arms burning, and for a fleeting second, you imagine dumping the whole bucket over the madam's head. Joke number 2 warms you like a secret ember, though you keep your face blank. That evening, patrons arrive from the forum after hearing trials in the basilica. They are still buzzing with talk of law and justice. One boasts he watched a senator condemn a thief to flogging. Another laughs about a woman fined for adultery. They look at you and say, "Rome is strict. Virtue must be protected." The irony nearly chokes you. You smile anyway, whispering silently, "Protecting virtue by buying vice." Brilliant. Joke number 3. Personantes. The patrons grow restless, demanding novelty. One insists the women act out gladiatorial combat with wooden spoons as swords. Another arranges a mock chariot race around the couches, cushions as horses, laughter filling the air. You run in circles until your lungs ache, then collapse as they cheer. Entertainment, they call it. Degradation. You know it is. A fringe tidbit drifts from conversation. One man swears he saw a foreign healer selling charms against love. He describes a pouch filled with wolf hair and lead tablets, buried under thresholds to kill passion. You imagine planting one here, silencing desire at its root. The thought almost feels like hope. Later, when the patrons leave, the madam inspects the room, counting coins, tallying performances like an accountant. She warns that next week must be better, or punishment will come. The women nod mechanically, but in the corner, one mutters, "Maybe the punishment is less tiring than the work." You want to laugh, but you bite your lip instead. The night drags on. You curl into your mat, ears filled with coughs, breaths, whispers. The sparrows above your head seem to flutter in the lamplight, though you know they are still. You shut your eyes and think of air that doesn't stink of incense, of streets where laughter isn't bought, but the dream slips away, like coins through the madam's fingers. The days blur after the festival, but not into calm, into something heavier, like ash after fire. The air in the dormitory clings to you, damp with sweat, sour with unwashed bodies. Each morning begins with the madam's sandals smacking the stone floor, her voice like iron scraping clay. She demands more for less, More smiles for fewer patrons, more laughter for smaller coins, more endurance for dwindling wine. You wake each day and feel the straw prick your skin, as if it resents you too. You turn to your little charcoal sparrows and think, "At least they don't have to pay rent." That's joke number 1, muttered under your breath as you drag yourself upright. The routine continues, but something in the house has shifted. Exhaustion has carved deeper lines into every face. One girl drops a jug during chores and freezes, eyes wide, waiting for punishment. But the madam doesn't whip her. She just glares and snarls. "Clean it with your tongue if you must, but don't waste another drop." The girl kneels, scooping shards with trembling hands. The rest of you pretend not to see. At night, you overhear a patron mutter that taxes are rising. He complains about the vectigal, the tax on brothels, saying the adels squeeze even more profit out of pleasure. A mainstream fact, brothels in Rome did pay a specific tax, often recorded openly. Historians still argue whether this made life inside marginally safer or simply legitimized the exploitation. From your bench, listening to him grumble while draining another cup, you know the answer. One evening brings a different kind of patron, a traveling merchant with goods from Egypt. He brags about crocodile dung used as contraception, holding up a jar as though it were perfume. The men laugh, mocking the absurdity. But you remember stories of women clinging to such remedies, desperate for control in a world that gave them none. You wonder if even dung would be kinder than this house. That thought is joke number 2, bitter and sharp, and you almost laugh at the truth of it. The madam grows more paranoid. She accuses the women of plotting against her, of hiding coins, of whispering too much in the dark. She paces the dormitory at night, oil lamp casting her shadow across the walls like a specter. She shouts once that unity breeds rebellion. Her fear is almost comical, if not so cruel. You whisper to the woman beside you, "If we were plotting, we'd at least demand better straw." Joke number 3. She covers her mouth to stifle the laugh. Fringe detail. During some Roman festivals, prostitutes were banned from appearing in public, forced to stay indoors while citizens paraded. You wonder if those laws were ever enforced in brothels like this. Historians still argue whether such bans were moral theater or genuine regulation. For you, the result would be the same. You'd still be locked inside, barred not just from festivals, but from freedom itself. As nights stretch into weeks, the silence grows heavier than the laughter ever was. Patrons still come, coins still clink, but the spark of mockery fades. You find yourself going through motions without thought, your smile automatic, your laughter hollow. Even the jokes you whisper to yourself sound quieter, as though your own voice is sinking under the weight. And that is how the days lead into the breaking point. Not with a whip, not with a punishment, not even with hunger, but with the numbness that spreads like frost through your chest, slowing each thought, each breath, until only the routine remains. Morning feels brittle, like the first touch on a cracked cup. You rise because everyone rises, because the body knows the routine better than thought. The sparrows you drew above your mat have smudged into soft fingerprints. The wall looks like it has been crying. The madam's sandals slap the corridor, fast, purposeful, and the door flies open with news delivered as casually as weather. One of you has been sold to a house across the river. She says the name like a blessing, but you hear the hiss of a knife in silk. The house works like a throat swallowing. By noon, the space on the mat is empty, the air shaped like the girl who is no longer there. Promotion, the madam calls it, counting coins. You whisper, promotion of her purse. Joke number 1. It earns a glare. You lower your eyes and scrape wax from a lamp until your nails are black. The day presses forward with the slow cruelty of certainty. The wine jugs sweat, the frescoes flake, the incense fails. Mid-afternoon, a thud shakes the ceiling. Dust drifts like flour over heads and shoulders. Someone shouts about a cracked beam. The assistant waves it off. It stood for years, but insulae fall as easily as dice. A mainstream fact. Fires and collapses plagued Rome so often that Augustus formed the vigils, night watchmen who hauled water, broke doors, and beat flames with wet cloths. They were part fire brigade, part police, and always too late for someone. Toward evening, the crack complains again. A long wooden groan, and a sliver of plaster kisses your shoulder. You laugh once, absurd and small. Free exfoliation, you whisper. Joke number 2. The older woman snorts, then coughs until her ribs seize. You steady her and smell the fever rising like a second lamp. Night brings the patrons who do not look up. They drink under the treacherous beam as if roofs were immortal. The madam orders you to sing. Your voice is a thin thread, pulling a weight it cannot lift. When the thread snaps, no one notices. Work shifts you like tide-moving stones. You pour, you smile, you nod. You vanish into a room and return with your face put back on. Near midnight, the woman who always said her name was Today lies down and does not rise. Her breath flutters, then goes silent, like a curtain sighing shut. The room holds still long enough to count 3 heartbeats that do not belong to her. The madam clicks her tongue, irritation at lost revenue, then sends the assistant for a board and a cloth. The women form a wall with their bodies so patrons won't see the bundle pass. You walk beside it because your feet decide to, because the corridor has narrowed to a point that only forward fits. Outside, the air tastes of smoke and fennel and night water. By law, the dead must go beyond the city walls. The living follow as far as they dare. Along the roads, tombs glow pale in moonlight, grand fronts for names that will not disappear. You know the other side of that law. The poor and the enslaved end in pits or cheap plots, in columbaria where niches stack urn upon urn like a hive. Historians still argue whether funeral clubs, the Collegia Funeraticea, gave people like Gau a decent burial, or were mostly vehicles for dues and status. Tonight, there's no debate. She is carried away in silence, another ledger closed. A fringe tidbit surfaces as you walk back. Bronze wind chimes, tintinnabula, hung from doorways to scare off evil. One tinkles faintly above a shop, and for an instant the sound is so clean you mistake it for kindness. Then the board tips, your shoulder takes the weight, and kindness dissolves like smoke. When you return, the crack in the ceiling has widened into a line you can read. It says, "Stop pretending." The assistant sets a bucket beneath it and calls the problem solved. You almost congratulate the bucket on its promotion to architecture. Joke number 3. You don't say it aloud. The urge to speak has gone quiet, like a dog learning not to bark. Back in the dormitory, the flock of charcoal sparrows has a gap where Today used to sleep. You lift the stub and start a new bird, then lower the charcoal. The motion feels like lifting a cup after the last drop is gone. Around you, the women are already turning to tasks. Their hands know the grammar of survival. You unclasp the little bronze charm at your throat and tie it to the beam above your mat, not as prayer, not as rebellion, but as a signpost. Here lies endurance. There is no speech for the breaking point. It doesn't slam, it settles. It is not the lash or the hunger or the laugh. It is waking to find that hope has become furniture, present, heavy, never moved. You are still inside your life, but the room inside you has gone hush. The hush is not emptiness, it is padding, a felt-wrapped box where blows land and do not echo. Work continues. The madam counts. Felix scratches another line on a wall no one will save. You carry wine past the beam, past the bucket, past the fresco that chips exactly where Venus's smile should be. The city turns and turns, and you discover that numbness is not the absence of feeling, but the practice of setting feelings down and walking away fast. You can come back for them later, you tell yourself. Later, when the door is unbarred. Later, when the beam is mended. Later, when today means something other than goodbye. For now, you sleep because the body commands it. Before your eyes close, you make one small promise to the sparrows. Tomorrow, if the ceiling holds, and the bucket behaves, and the vigils keep their distance, you will add a wingtip, a line so faint it looks like breath. Not hope, not prayer, just proof that you were here. The hard edges of the city fall away now, like masks set gently on a shelf, and the corridors you walked soften into long, quiet hallways that carry no footsteps. Lamps dim to coals, then to embers, and even the cracked beam becomes only a line in a dream you no longer have to read. Breathe in, slow and easy, and let your shoulders sink. Breathe out, and imagine the straw beneath you turning to a calm, warm shore that keeps its shape and holds your weight. The sounds that stayed with you, the coins, the whispers, the scrape of sandals, drift outward like small boats at dusk, each one floating farther until it is only a dot, and then gone. In this softer light, the painted Venus is just color on plaster, and the collar is only a circle of shadow around your neck, loosening, loosening, and then gone. Your little flock of sparrows gathers above, not to leave you, but to settle, a feathered hush that keeps watch while you rest. If a joke lingers, let it be a kind one, a smile you give yourself because you earned it, because even in the narrowest rooms you found breath. Let the oddities, crocodile dung sunscreen, Lucky Charms, Felix and his endless name, shrink to curiosities in a cabinet you can close whenever you like. Each breath grows wider, each thought grows softer. The night wraps like a long cloak, the good heavy kind that carries the scent of wool and rain. You are safe here for this moment. You are whole here for this moment. You are allowed to sleep. If the city murmurs, let it murmur without you. If the lamps gutter, let them gutter into sleep as well. You are drifting now, light as a sparrow's wing, toward the kind of quiet that keeps its promises.